Hello everyone. We're going to go ahead today and we're going to talk about setting up some basic carriers in TMS. This is going to be going through the transportation management module in Dynamics to set up those carriers. Later on, we're going to use the same carrier I'm going to set up here as a demo to create a rate base and a rate master, some rating profiles, surcharges, mileage, and use that to demo the load planning workbench and some rating uh, profiles for Dynamics to get some inbound or some outbound goods to travel through a load and rate what it's going to take a carrier to ship that product. If you notice my screen is dark, I am using Microsoft Edge and an add-on called Dark Reader in order to make the screen both dark or light. I'm also using version 10.0.9 or 10.9 as some people would say of Dynamics Update 33 for this. I also have the legacy turned on for navigation, so as we go by you can see the breadcrumb at the top showing how to get from point A to point B, and I'm going to use USMF Contoso data within a Microsoft One box. So let's go ahead and get started. In the modules section here, I'm going to scroll down to transportation management, and I'm going to see 5 here that are used within the transportation management module. We're going to go to setup, and we're going to go ahead and set up some shipping carriers under the carriers node here. And in here you can see USMF has several carriers already set up for showing you various ways a carrier can be used: ocean, LTL, a rail carrier, a parcel carrier. We're going to create one particular carrier that's going to do a couple of different services for us. Let's look first at a common carrier. We'll look at this LTL carrier. You can see they gave it a name, a unique carrier identification called LTL, gave it a name, and then a mode. They activated it here, and there's another activation button here for the carrier rating. The difference between these two is this will actually enable the carrier to be used in inbound and outbound loading, or being able to use it for sales and purchase orders, for example, inbound and outbound. Activate carrier rating allows you to activate this carrier and use rate masters and rate bases. And what those do is you can put in a price per ton, a price per mile, a flat rate fee, a fee based on pounds or a volume. And we're going to get to those later on, but this allows you to turn this on to make it rateable using the load planning workbench and the rate shop within the load planning workbench, and attach those two rates uh, as you're shipping product out the door or bringing it in. Services here attached to this carrier, they had one service which was an LTL service for ground. And what services do is you can identify the different type of services that this particular carrier will provide for you. We're going to add some services with a carrier. We're going to add a flatbed truck. We're going to add a container truck and a loading truck. And we'll talk about the differences between those three as how I'm going to relate to them when I make some orders in the future using Advanced Warehouse, and how they need to either be containerized, volumized, or per weight. You also have on the bottom here an addresses where you can type in addresses for this particular carrier and its services, and then you have a rating profile. We won't get into much in setting up rating profiles right now, but what this does, it allows you to take a certain rate engine, a certain rate master that you may have prices on in a rate base, transit type engines, which have to do with how long it's going to take for time wise for it to get from one destination to the other. 1 day, 1.5 day, 2 days. You can also add carrier indexes for fuel, and also give it a time range on when you want this to be activated. So you can have multiple profiles with any given time to switch on and off at certain periods of a season to have them effective. We won't go through that in this tutorial. We'll do it later on in life when we make bases and rate masters. So let's go ahead and set up a carrier. There's a new button on the top here. We're going to click new, and we're going to type in a unique identifier for this particular shipping carrier. We're going to call it Ohio Carriers, and we're going to give it a name, Ohio Carriers, and then we give it a mode. Now you're going to see mode quite often, mode of delivery, modes, with transportation methods. This mode is just signifying the type of carrier that this would be. If you had one general defining given identity or attribute to this particular type of carrier, what it would be. And if you notice a lot in dynamics, you can hover over it. Mode will allow you to see what the difference is here. This one just is mode. Transportation tender type may come up, and you can see a description of this as well. We're going to go ahead and activate the carrier here to make it usable in our loads. We're also right now going to activate the carrier rating because I don't want to forget about it in the future. We are going to use this later on to do the rate masters and the rate bases, and we want this to be rateable through the load planning workbench. You can put in a tracking URL and a website URL for this particular carrier. For a vendor account, this becomes important, and I'm just going to go ahead and type it in, and you can see I have Ohio carriers. And where the vendor account comes into play is TMS allows you to submit invoices from this carrier. So you may get a PDF invoice from a carrier or electronic invoice from a carrier, and you want to go ahead and match it with your outbound load. Your outbound load will create what's called a freight bill. You can match them together and submit them for payment to your AP department. We'll go through that procedure later on in a couple of seminars, but it allows you to do the same thing typically as you would with a PO. You have a receipt, you want to match the receipt to the invoice you get, make sure your quantities match, your prices match, put them together, send them to AP, they can make a payment proposal. The same process can happen here in TMS, and there's a separate module for creating, or excuse me, a separate procedure within the transportation module for matching that invoice to a created freight bill in Dynamics, putting them together, submitting them to your AP department. So the vendor account does come into play here. Let's go ahead and set up a few services. Now, services, typically people will set up just one, but you can have as many services as you want for a carrier, telling yourself or your transportation coordinator, manager, whoever it may be, that these are the type of services that this particular carrier can create. So we're going to create a couple services here. First one I'm going to create, and I'm just going to do this for, pretending that my nomenclature here, FB would be a flatbed truck. It's 53 feet long, and it is it's not weighted, or it could be weighted. I'm just going to create it as flatbed 53 foot, and I'm going to name it flatbed 53 foot truck. Load template ID has to do with our load planning workbench. If we want to create a template to say this is a certain type of container, a certain type of loading container, a flatbed truck that can load a container, or a flatbed truck where you would tie down steel reels, for example, the template allows you to say I can only allow so many pounds or tons or kilograms of weight on this truck to ship it out the door. I can only allow 20 pallets. I can only allow 4 steel reels of a certain size on this truck. So you have some dimensions on a load template ID to kind of give a transportation coordinator an idea of what can go on this and what can't go on this. I'm going to go ahead and just select standard load template. Later on, I'm going to create a loader truck, which is going to have a weight base per, only allowing 20 tons to fit on that particular carrier service. Transportation method, I'm going to say that this is a ground type. Mode of delivery will get created automatically. If I have any kind of external codes I want to give this, I can. A billing group comes into play if you want to segregate different types of invoices and freight bills together to be paid in a certain way, or segregate them as how they need to be matched through automatic matching later on. Right now, we're not going to get into too much of that. I'm just going to select them as being freight. and I'm going to create another service, and I'm going to say that this is a flatbed container truck, which is just a flatbed truck, and I can load a container on there. I might want to signify that this is only going to be a 40-foot container. So I'm going to say flatbed container 40 foot. I'll go ahead and I'll put the quotes behind here so we know it's foot as well. Actually, I'm going to keep that the way it is. And then I'll go ahead and through the load template ID here, I'm going to go ahead and still select the standard container, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select ground for this as well, and it's going to go ahead and fill in the mode of delivery, and I'm going to say this is freight as well. So I got two different types of containers here, and I'm going to go ahead and save this off, and I'm actually going to change both of these here now, and if you notice I can't change them. I wanted to change that from inches to 40 foot because I realized that I put in the wrong asterisk for both of these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to